All right. Today is August 17, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes implementation group for CSI. Most folks are out today. There's another meeting for SIG storage discussing cloning. So it's just me and Vlad here, and we're going to take this time today to discuss some design issues. So let's get started.
Sure. Okay. So I called Jan early this morning, because I wanted to make sure I got his attention, just to get some clarification on some stuff. So a couple things. He is, because some of the stuff was kind of confusing. I'm like, well, I thought inline was just ephemeral, non-attached. So because there's some stuff in the PSP in the pod security policy.
Yep.
That I was looking for clarification on. So one of them was, I think it allowed, I'm just kind of bringing you up to speed. Was it allow attachable CSI volume? So I asked him about it. He said, well, basically what his intentions are is eventually he wants CSI inline to support both attachable and eventually, non-attachable and eventually attachable. So that would,
Could you pull up the proposal, the pod security part you're talking about?
Absolutely. Let me bring it up and I'll share my screen. I'll just bring it up in my. Where is it? All right. Okay, so you should be seeing my ID.
Yep.
Yeah. So this section, the one I was talking about, is basically the pod security policy.
Yep. So allowed CSI drivers makes perfect sense. There's a list of drivers that we're going to allow.
Right. And then there is this guy. So I'll bring that back up at the end of my current train of thought. But this is the one I was talking about.
Okay.
Allow attachable CSI volume. So
interesting.
Yeah, when I asked him about it, he said eventually he would like to see both attachable and non-attachable to be supported for inline. And basically this would be a kind of a switch to completely to turn on attachable support.
So if this was, let's say it was implemented and somebody set this to true, how would we validate it? Would we look at the CSI registry?
Yeah, we would have to go somewhere else.
And for me, I would say, like, my initial gut feeling is start off with the minimal API as possible. So this is like, it would be a nice to have, but we don't need to have it right now. I guess the counter argument to that is you can always start off more restrictive and then loosen things, but you can't go the other way.
Right.
So if we didn't put this in now, what that implies is that the cluster admin can choose any CSI driver they want to expose as inline. It could be attachable, it could be non-attachable. We don't look at the differentiation.
Right.
If we introduce this Boolean, then we have two limits. By default, if this one is not set, we only allow the cluster admin to whitelist things that are non-attachable.
Non-attachable, right.
And then I'm not sure what the benefit there is, because many attachable volumes are going to have issues running inline. So for example, if you look at a GCE persistent disk or an Amazon AWS volume, oftentimes they have zone information, and that zone information is captured on the PV object outside of the volume source. Like there's a field called, I think, like allowed topologies or something like that. and then
Right.
like a topology selector. And that information is lost if you basically put that into uh,
Source.
into a source. Yeah. So for that reason, in general, attachable volumes don't work well. But ultimately, we could make it, if we just say it's a decision for the admin to make, it's a simple whitelist. If they want to whitelist some attachable volume, they can. Uh,
Yeah.
that seems reasonable. What did
Yeah.
Jan think about this?
I mean, basically, that's kind of what he explained to me. And I asked him, well, my point was, if that's the case, we need to put that in the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what threw me, kind of confused me, because I didn't realize that we were also trying to eventually support attachable.
Mm-hmm.
So I added this line. So this is my update to the PR. I added this line and this line.
Okay. So add construct for eventually supporting attachable volumes. Yeah. I don't think that should be the goal. I
Okay.
think the goal is to support ephemeral volumes. Attachable volumes should not be something that we strive to do extra work to support. If by
At the very least
accident,
for this proposal, right?
for this proposal,
Okay.
like as far as we're concerned, there's no reason for us to try and support attachable volumes. I guess one one reason actually might be the in-tree migration thing that's going to happen eventually.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that today, CSI, or sorry, GCPD and AWS and all these volumes that are in-tree can be specified inline.
Right. And that was his
That's his
that was
argument.
Jan's um kind of reason for this,
Okay. Okay.
because
Uh,
existing volumes. So I mean, and that's why I put the word eventual, because we don't know when this could
so,
happen.
so I still wouldn't put that into this document.
Okay.
I think we can tackle that as a separate issue in the migration thing, as long as we don't block out the possibility in this PR. I wouldn't put it as a goal in this PR, but I would also
Okay.
just ensure that in the back of our mind, we're not doing anything that we will block it out, and
Uh,
make sure that David Zhu takes a look at this and doesn't see any major issues with it.
okay.
The things that scare me are like, oh yeah, there's all this other information on PV that's not going to be available in inline, so topology. But for the in-tree migration stuff, that's already the case. So today, if you use a GC, PD, or AWS through a PV, PVC, zone stuff works nicely. If you do it inline, it's kind of doesn't.
I see.
So if the in-tree migration is trying to keep the same behavior,
All right.
then we're going to we're going to have to allow this, but it might need to be more fine controlled than that.
In this right here.
Yeah, because I don't want to just allow all CSI volumes. Like a normal, brand new CSI driver that's attachable has no good reason to try to be inline. The only attachable volumes that try to be inline are the ones that have an in-tree driver
Mm,
that's already doing this for backward
that's
compatibility.
already in line. Right. Okay.
And even those, I would try to limit it somehow. I don't know how, uh, for that migration scenario. So if you come in with an inline GCPD, you're able to do this, but not if you come in with a CSI GCPD driver directly.
Or should this be a list
Oh.
similarly to what we're doing here?
Um,
So allowed
yeah,
allowed
yeah,
attachable
yeah. That
CSI
actually would make,
drivers.
maybe. For now, I would just drop it. If Jan is okay with it, I would just drop this part. What
Okay,
I
I'll
would do
check
is
with them.
check with Jan, say, hey, I'm going to drop this part for the purposes of this design. The goal is let's make ephemeral volumes work.
Okay.
Once we get that in, we've unblocked ephemeral volumes. Then we can tackle as a separate question how to do attachable inline volumes for the in-tree migration. And the second thing I would do is reach out to David Zhu and be like, hey, here's what we have planned. Given the design that you have for your in-tree migration, is this going to be sufficient? We realize that you might have to do additional work on top of it, but is this sufficient as a building block? Or is it going to box you out and prevent you from doing something? If both of them are okay with it, I think it seems reasonable to go with the simplest option.
Okay. But I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing that I was kind of, and maybe I'm just not thinking about this the right way, is right now today, CSI is what our beta.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we don't know the amount of drivers that are out there, but
Right.
I would imagine all drivers that are out there are attachable at this point.
Most likely, yeah.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not actually, no, not necessarily attachable. You could have like a bunch of NFS ones.
Yeah, and okay,
Remote, but
NFS,
not
yes.
attachable.
Yeah. Okay, so we still have to. Okay. All right. So the other thing I talked to Jan about is to, because I was not feeling comfortable with the what was it, the prefix, the volume. Let me see if I can find it. The volume handle prefix. Where is this thing? Yeah, so the volume handle prefix is, I guess that's the mechanism. Let me just.
Yeah, this is basically trying to be like a string match kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it was a way of kind of avoid. You know what? I already took it out. That's what it is. So it was a way to kind of allow, I'm guessing, a way to name spacing the volume handle so that there's no collision or somebody can't guess what the prefix would, what the volume name would be from a Kubernetes point of view. The user wouldn't be able to guess somebody else's name. So I there was another type called volume handle prefix, and you have to specify it both in the volume source and then here as well, where he had a list of allowed volume handle prefixes. So,
Interesting. So basically what this is if you whitelist the CSI driver above, then this, and you have this, that means that you can't just arbitrarily access any volume that you want. You can only access some subset.
as a user, and this volume prefix, the prefix would indicate how to generate a prefix, whether you're using a pod ID or a namespace, etc. So I was not feeling comfortable with it. So I mean it seemed to me a bit overburdensome.
Yeah.
So he agreed that possibly what we could do is during node publish, which happens in the mounting setup app,
Mm-hmm.
which at that point you get a pod, you get pod information. So if we need to do any kind of obfuscation of volume handle name, we could automatically do it using the pod GUID.
Why does he want the volume handle obfuscated?
I think it was based on something that Jordan brought up, and
Mm-hmm.
I never quite understood the issue, and I read it on the PR, and I'm like, I didn't get it. So maybe I'll go back.
Pull that up. Let's take a look at that real quick.
Sure. Let me see where that's at. CSI support. Yeah. So you should be seeing my browser.
Yep.
All right. So somewhere in here, there is, and I did ask him if we can join. He said he couldn't join today.
Jordan?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if I can find the exact location where they're talking about this stuff. I might have already passed it, but hang on one second. It might be in here. No, I thought. I'm wondering if it was mostly like an offline discussion, but
It might be one of these collapsed comments
yeah.
here. Click show outdated.
Oh, sorry.
I guess it takes
I
you back.
might have already clicked. Yeah, let's see. There you go.
There we go.
All right. So what indicates attached detached phase? All right. I don't think it's here. And this is so early, they were still talking about PVs, and it would be the same as we. All right, let's see. CSI volume handle. Okay, CSI volume handle in a PV is considered trustworthy because creating a PV is highly privileged. CSI volume handle in a pod is not particularly trustworthy. What happens if two pods in different namespaces scheduled in the same node both specify? Okay, so that was, I guess that's where all this came from.
All right, so CSI volume handle in the pod is not trustworthy. What happens if two pods in different namespaces both specify the same CSI driver and volume handle, but different volume attributes? Which one wins and gets its content in the single volume attachment object? The first one wins. It's the same as if two users create non-CSI volumes such as Ceph, RBD, or AWS, which brings up another topic. We should extend PSP to disallow individual CSI drivers inlined in pods, similar to
Okay, so this is where this is coming from.
which brings us
So I'm guessing Flex already supports that.
can we pull up the Flex link and see why? Let's see, allowed Flex volumes.
Oh, this is the PSP.
As a whitelist, an empty or no means this. We make sure this. It just has it there. It doesn't say why. So allowed flex volumes, example/LVM, example/CIFS.
Yeah, so this is what we were looking at earlier.
So essentially, it's a whitelist of drivers that you're allowed to fetch through this thing.
Right, that we already talked about. That's the very first PSP object we looked at. The other thing was, the other issue was, do we need another thing to say how to prefix the volume handle, which I thought was kind of, because if I'm not mistaken, well, what I was pushing for was, hey, why don't we just use the pod GUID as a way of, if we need to, kind of namespace the name to avoid collision, like excuse me, like Jordan was saying.
Well, let's go back to the proposal and walk me through what it would actually, look like if it was implemented. I don't think I follow.
Well, let's do this. Let me do a view on this so I could see the original.
So let's go through this prefix thing. What does that actually look like? So if I
Hang on,
am
let me do a view so it'll
sure.
all this. Yeah, there you go.
So I'm a cluster admin. I decide that this is in the volume source. This is not part of the pod security policy.
No, it's also part of the pod security policy as
Oh,
well.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's right here. This is allowed prefixes.
Okay. So now let's go back to the volume source. What does it mean there? How do we use it? So volume is a type of prefix added to the volume handle before using it as a CSI volume ID to ensure that the volume with the same handle in different pods or namespaces gets unique CSI volume ID.
Right.
I mean
it makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah, because there could be if users are specifying the names, you could very well be entering a situation where you have collisions. I get that.
Sure, but where do we use the volume handle directly from two different drivers where a collision is possible?
It only shows up in source. What do you mean by where?
Oh, the volume driver source. I mean, even in the source, you have a driver and you have a volume handle. The driver is going to be different. The volume handle is going to be the same, right? That's the case that we're worrying about.
I guess we're worrying about the case where the driver, the volume handle is the same, but in a different pod gamma or something, I'm guessing.
Oh, in a different pod.
Yeah. I mean, my suggestion was, hey, if we need to come up with a naming collision strategy, let's just apply it.
Yeah, that's like an in-tree logic thing. Like if there is somewhere where we need to be able to differentiate between these two types of things, the in-tree caches and in-tree logic need to basically do that disambiguation, and they can, like you said, they could use pod UID, pod whatever. I don't think that needs to be promoted into the API here. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it took me a while to understand it. So I think I kind of talk them out of it.
Okay.
So
yeah, I agree.
And the other question I had too is, okay, for inline, don't we have to have a pre-existing volume somewhere in the driver or in the storage subsystem? Or are we expecting?
Yeah, for CSI volume source inline, you have to have it pre-provisioned.
Pre-provisioned, right?
Yeah, we do not support dynamic provisioning if you're doing inline. The assumption is you know what you're doing and the volume already exists.
Okay, and that's what I thought.
So the only thing that you have to do for an inline is attach, and ideally we don't even want to support that, and then mount. Which is the two calls, the stage. And actually, if you're not doing attachable volumes, you don't even have to do a stage. It's just the last one.
Right.
But it sounds like because of the migration thing, we want to at least support some of the attach. So we got to do the node stage and the controller publish.
Because if the name has to, if we're not going to do provisioning, then a lot of this complexity, because I think the KFox 111, the guy on the PR was saying he wanted to see where you don't even specify a volume handle at all.
Okay.
And have this
provisioned? No.
Yeah, it gets provisioned.
No.
that was confusing the heck out of me. And then I'm like, oh, do you mean that? So finally I understood that he wanted it to be provisioned but apparently
I
Flex is doing all that. And that's what's driving a lot of this.
Yeah, I guess the reason is if you think about the use case that they're interested in, it's ephemeral volumes.
Right.
So ephemeral volumes, think of something like a secret volume. I want to
Right.
create
Right.
a secret volume that takes, some secrets from the Kubernetes API and
Right.
injects them into a directory in my volume or in
Right.
my pod.
Yep.
If I were to do that through this CSI volume source, the driver is very clear. I'm going to make it my CSI secret driver. The read-only bit we ignore, FS type we ignore. Scroll down a little bit, volume attributes. Volume attributes is going to say, I want these secrets or whatever, like a pointer to the secrets. Controller publish secret reference. We need to talk about these secrets as well. Let's leave that as a separate discussion.
Okay.
Okay. So volume attributes lets you specify, or maybe even the node publish secret lets you specify the secret that you're interested in. And the volume name doesn't actually make a lot of sense because the volume itself is ephemeral.
The volume name.
Or the volume handle. I see where he's
So,
coming from.
okay. Right. If that's what I was saying. So, and that's why I asked that question. If we're doing ephemeral, something like a secret, which are the cases in the PR.
Yeah.
We shouldn't. In that case, we wouldn't specify a volume handle.
Yeah. Can you pull up the Kubernetes core types.go file? I want to take a look at the secret volume source.
Where is that?
It should be under Kubernetes package APIs core.
Oh yeah. I was looking at it.
So that's it.
You just want to see types, right?
Go down right here, APIs, and then there should be core, and then there should be v1 types.go. Or yeah, this one right here, types.go. Yeah. And then look for secret volume source in here. And then let's look at the struct for that. All right, so they got the secret name, the items that they want to expose from that secret, default mode, and optional. So I think all four of those parameters could be they could be part of the volume attributes.
Right.
But maybe the driver author can say that the volume handle should be the secret name. Let's take a look at another ephemeral volume. So let's look at the GitHub repo or Git repo volume source. You got repository, revision, and directory. All three of those could be volume attributes.
I see what you're doing.
Interesting. Yeah. We could make a volume handle optional for CSI inline.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's up to the driver to determine if it's required or not. An ephemeral volume could choose to not even have a volume handle. But the challenge with that is pull up the CSI spec. I think we might even require it.
For source, yes. I mean, for a persistent source, yes.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
CSI persistent volume. Oh no, I was thinking about the spec itself. Once we call through to CSI, if you look at the spec.md on container storage interface repo.
Oh, that's spec. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's spec. Hang on one sec.
Let's look for spec.md. Yep, that one. And
Right.
In here, look at the node publish volume request.
Volume request.
And the next one right here.
There you go.
So volume ID is required.
Oh, that's what you were talking about. Okay. Yeah, no, but that's fine. If it's auto-generated, that's fine, right?
If it's meaning like our internal code automatically generates some ID.
Yeah. Which is just, yeah, I mean, it's because, I mean, if we're doing I'm just thought experiment, ephemeral Git repo or whatever.
Okay.
Um, if the user does, if we don't require volume handle, you still have to have some kind of handle internally inside the driver. So the CEO, in this case, Kubernetes, would take care of generating some kind of name for that, or some kind of handle for that. All right.
The problem is, how do we differentiate between the case where a driver requires a volume ID and the user didn't specify it versus the one where the driver doesn't require it and the user doesn't specify it? And in one case,
Right.
we should error. In the other case, we should auto-generate.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the auto-generated would only happen for these
Like,
specific types for inline ephemeral, and that's it. So
but
if
how do we detect ephemeral? We can detect inline by saying, okay, if your PSP pod security policy says that you're allowed to do inline, okay, you're inline.
mm-hmm.
How do we detect that the inline is ephemeral, not remote?
Okay, so that comes back to the question I had at the very beginning. Should we be doing
Remote.
attachable
I think
remote?
we kind of have to because of the stupid CSI migration thing.
Right. Okay,
Uh,
so if we have to, then how do we? Okay, so then
shit.
would the no, it's yeah, exactly. Would the the CRD you're working on, would that help?
It could. We could use it to have an attribute that says I require auto-generated volume handles.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's set, then we look at it and we go, okay, we'll automatically generate a volume handle for you.
I'm wondering if that's what Jan was getting at with the volume handle prefix.
Yeah, possibly.
If that's what he was trying to solve.
Let's check the time.
Yeah.
This is a very good discussion, though. We might want to continue at a later point.
It's up to you. I think I'm good on time.
Okay. I gotta run.
Okay.
Let's. Yeah, I think these are all really, really good questions. Let's carry them on maybe set up a meeting later today or on Monday, and we can continue there.
All right. I'll ping you.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, man.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.